Ah, sweet. The CDC approves a second booster shot for the Omicron virus. This is great. It's those that are immunocompromised and over 65 are eligible to get this booster.
The government has just approved a second dose of the COVID booster for the elderly and immunocompromised. The bivalent booster shot targets the Omicron variants. Seniors 65 years and older can now receive the updated booster 4 months after their first dose. Meanwhile, people with weak immune systems can get an additional shot of the vaccine after 2 months. To help us understand why this is a significant move in the fight against COVID-19, I'm joined by Dr. Jeremy Faust, emergency physician at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and the author of Inside Medicine on Substack. Dr. Faust, welcome and thanks for joining us. These steps are very targeted to vulnerable populations, to seniors and the immunocompromised. Does this make sense to you as the right move given where we are in this pseudo post-pandemic world right now?
Thank you for having me. This move does make sense because it acknowledges that there is a large spectrum of risk out there. It is a one-size-fits-all approach really wouldn't make sense, treating a 10-year-old with no medical problems with the same vaccine strategy as a 70-year-old who has cancer and is on chemotherapy. So I think that today's move really addresses that discrepancy and allows for a little bit of nuance in terms of how we approach the next phase.
At the same time, we should know booster uptake has been very low. These shots do no good just sitting on the shelves. Only about 20% of all adults have gotten that updated booster since September. So isn't that an argument for just opening it up to anyone who wants it?
Well, there are downsides to overboosting, but in the high-risk population, what wins the day are the upsides. So in terms of a short-term prevention against severe hospitalizations and mortality deaths, the benefit for that high-risk group, the severely immune-compromised, older populations in general, does make it worthwhile because there could be a downside of overboosting, which is that we are training our immune system to expect a particular virus. And if we keep showing it the same thing over and over again, including half of this vaccine, which still has half of the Wuhan virus in it, we actually risk a longer-term increase in infections. So I really support the idea of zeroing in on the people who need that protection from the serious outcomes, because we know that in a short period of time.
What needs to be done is the CDC sends out people and people with the training of giving vaccines to go out from door to door, giving vaccines to those who need it most, and it wouldn't even cost that much to do that.
Time, it works very, very well.
What about what's ahead, especially for younger and healthy people? Could we be seeing another shot being offered for them as we move through the summer and into another fall and winter season?
I think the CDC and the FDA is signaling an annual kind of cycle for the general population, the younger, healthier populations. I think that's appropriate. I think that the value add of a booster for younger, healthy populations hasn't always been that clear. We've always lumped in young and healthy with older and sicker when making the booster for all argument. Nowadays, I think we're being a little bit more nuanced, and so offering it less often for the lower risk makes a ton of sense. I do think that in June, we're going to hear more about what they're going to put into a fall booster, and I suspect and I hope that it will be a booster that only contains virus that is currently circulating. In other words, the original virus, the Wuhan strain, really isn't out there anymore. We are in an Omicron world, and we should be boosting against that virus.
Dr. Faust, there has been and continues to be some debate over how we're counting COVID hospitalizations and deaths, not necessarily people alleging nefarious intent here, but saying there's a difference between people who die with COVID versus people who die of COVID. They say we're counting both, and that could be an overcount. What do you say to that?
The concept to understand is called excess mortality. And the idea is not just are there COVID deaths, but are there more deaths of all causes combined than there should be? And throughout the pandemic, we have seen, for the most part, there's been constant excess mortality that goes way up when we have a wave and comes down after the wave. And we've very, very rarely seen a time.
Yeah, because COVID affects like pretty much all parts of the body. So if you do have some kind of pre-existing condition, it's going to make that worse, and you're going to die sooner than what you would have if you hadn't gotten COVID.
Where there were more COVID deaths being counted than there were all excess deaths. If that were to happen, you'd start to think, oh, there's something to that argument. But for the most part, it hasn't happened. It's happened at times. And in terms of hospitalizations and other outcomes, again, it's very difficult. People don't agree when they look at medical charts, but actually, when we do that kind of work, I think we do see that if anything, we're probably undercounting COVID deaths that happen that don't look like COVID deaths. So someone who dies at home, but they never got a COVID test, or someone who died of a diabetic crisis or a heart failure exacerbation, and it's chalked up to heart failure or diabetes, but they never would have had that exacerbation had they not contracted coronavirus the week before. And so as long
Yeah, because the coronavirus is very bad on the heart, causing inflammation in the heart. So yeah, if you do have a weakened heart, getting COVID can cause you to have a heart attack or have your heart shut down, compared to if you weren't getting COVID and you were just able to treat it and, still go on with life.
long as we have excess mortality and COVID deaths going hand in hand, step by step, it's pretty hard to make an epidemiological argument that would support the overcounting approach.
Still striking, over 250 people